In 1718, the most feared pirate in the Atlantic made a deal with the colonial governor that would create America's first corrupt political machine. A shadow government where pirates and politicians divided the spoils while maintaining a facade of legitimacy. This isn't ancient history. This is the blueprint. Every backroom deal in Washington, every suspiciously timed stock trade by members of Congress, every regulatory favor exchanged for future employment, all of them followed a pattern first perfected by Blackbeard and Governor Charles Eden in the swamps of North Carolina. Today, you'll discover how this unholy alliance operated not just as fascinating historical footnote, but as the original template for how power and profit continue to merge in America's corridors of influence. Now, this video isn't just about the story of a pirate who found governmental protection. It's the origin story of a system that still thrives in the shadows of power, where those who should enforce the law instead of profit from belonging to it. By the end of this discussion, you may see political corruption differently, because the most disturbing revelation isn't what happened there centuries ago, it's how little has changed since. And if you have not subscribed, please click like and subscribe the button now so you don't miss the upcoming videos about the hunt, the death, the ghost, and the treasure of Blackbeard. There's a link in the description below to the full Blackbeard playlist, but let's get going. In the golden age of piracy, the name Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, struck terror into the hearts of sailors across the Caribbean and the Atlantic seaboard. But while we have discussed his fearsome reputation in other videos, his burning beard and his dramatic death, few realize that this most notorious pirate once attempted to retire into respectability, creating an unprecedented alliance with colonial powers that would forever change North Carolina's coastal communities. The year was 1718. Blackbeard was weary from years of plundering. He sought what many men ultimately desire, a peaceful retirement. But where could a man whose face adorned wanted posters across the Atlantic seaboard possibly find safe harbor? The answer lay in the secluded inlets of the corrupt politics of colonial North Carolina. Now, Governor Charles Eden of North Carolina was facing challenges of his own. His colony was poor, underdeveloped, and desperately in need of economic stimulus. The official channels of trade were controlled by his northern and his southern neighbors, Virginia and South Carolina, leaving little North Carolina a little more than an afterthought in colonial commerce. So what Governor Eden needed was an unconventional solution, and Blackbeard provided the perfect opportunity. Their arrangement was elegantly simple, yet profoundly corrupt. Blackbeard would establish his base in the small town of Bath, bringing with him not just his fearsome reputation, but also something far more valuable: access to goods that would otherwise be unavailable to the struggling colony. In exchange, Eden would provide something priceless to a pirate: legitimacy and protection. The shores of Bath became home to an unprecedented experiment, a place where the line between pirate and merchant, criminal and citizen blurred into near invisibility. Blackbeard, the terror of the high seas, transformed himself into Captain Edward Teach, respectable resident of Bath, even marrying a local woman in a ceremony possibly performed by Governor Eden himself. But how did this arrangement actually function? The mechanics were simultaneously brazen and subtle. When Blackbeard captured prizes, he would bring them to North Carolina's isolated harbors. There, through a mockery of legal proceedings, Governor Eden would declare the captured vessels as legitimate seizures, allowing Blackbeard to sell their cargoes openly in the colonial markets. It may be a little bit reminiscent of the privateers and the letters of marque from the French government. Consider the case of a French ship that Blackbeard captured after receiving his pardon. The vessel was brought before Governor Eden, who dutifully declared it derelict, abandoned at sea, despite the obvious signs of violent seizure. The cargo, valued at thousands of pounds, was then divided between Blackbeard, his crew, and, critically, Governor Eden himself, along with Secretary Tobias Knight. The arrangement transformed Bath into a pirate haven like no other. Unlike the infamous pirate Republic of Nassau in the Bahamas, this was no independent outlaw state. This was piracy operating under the color of law, within the structures of colonial government. Pirates walked the streets of Bath openly, their pockets full of Spanish silver and Caribbean sugar. Taverns and shops flourished with the sudden influx of exotic goods and hard currency. But was this truly a corrupt bargain or something more complex? Some historians suggest that Governor Eden was making the best of an impossible situation, bringing a measure of control to piracy while boosting his colony's struggling economy. Others believe the arrangement went beyond pragmatism into outright criminal conspiracy. What is certain is that this pirate republic created powerful enemies. Alexander Spotswood, the ambitious governor of the neighboring Virginia, watched the arrangement with growing alarm. Not only was North Carolina's pirate haven disrupting legitimate trade, but it represented a dangerous precedent. Colonial officials openly collaborating with the very criminals they were sworn to suppress. Now, as Blackbeard settled into his new role as semi-legitimate businessman, patterns emerged that reveal the true nature of this pirate republic. Ships would mysteriously disappear near the North Carolina coast, only for their cargoes to appear in Bath's market days later. Colonial officials grew wealthy beyond their modest salaries, and their struggling colony suddenly found itself with access to goods from across the Atlantic world. The alliance created an economic system that operated in the shadows between legitimate trade and outright piracy. It was neither fully legal nor completely outside the law. It existed in a kind of a gray zone of colonial politics where power and profit trumped strict adherence to imperial regulations. But like all shadowy arrangements, the pirate republic of North Carolina could not last forever. Pressure mounted from neighboring colonies, particularly Virginia, where Governor Spotswood became increasingly frustrated with Eden's apparent collaboration with pirates. The delicate balance between piracy and legitimacy began to collapse. In November 1718, unable to tolerate the situation any longer, Governor Spotswood dispatched a naval expedition to North Carolina waters without Eden's knowledge or permission. A nearly unprecedented violation of colonial boundaries. The expedition's target was clear: Blackbeard himself. What followed was dramatic final battle of Blackbeard's life at Ocracoke Inlet. Lieutenant Robert Maynard, leading the expedition, engaged the pirate in a bloody hand-to-hand struggle that ended in Blackbeard's death and beheading. His severed head was hung from Maynard's bowsprit as proof of the mission's success. When Blackbeard's death, the pirate republic began to unravel. Governor Eden, though he protested Virginia's unauthorized incursion into his territory, could do little to prevent the collapse of the system he had helped to create. Investigation into Eden's secretary, Tobias Knight, revealed correspondence with Blackbeard that suggested deep official complicity in piracy. Yet perhaps the most telling aspect of the story is that Governor Eden himself was never officially charged or removed from office. The imperial authorities, while concerned about piracy, were equally concerned about maintaining colonial stability. Eden would remain governor until his death in 1722, taking money for the secrets of the Pirate Republic with him to the grave. Now, as we reflect on this remarkable chapter of American colonial history, we must ask ourselves, was the Pirate Republic of North Carolina merely a corruption arrangement between a criminal and a colonial official, or was it something more pragmatic? A pragmatic economic system born of necessity in a struggling economy? Perhaps it was both. A reminder that the foundations of American society were built not just on high ideals, but also on pragmatic compromises with forces that existed outside the law. The legacy of this Pirate Republic lives on in the small town of Bath, where Blackbeard's short-lived attempt at respectability has become the stuff of legend. But it also lives on in our understanding of how power, economics, and governance intersected in this complex world of colonial America. A world where the lines between legal and illegal, moral and immoral, were not always as clear as we might imagine. Now, we began this journey in the coastal swamps of colonial North Carolina, where a feared pirate and an ambitious governor created a system of mutual profit that operated just beyond the reach of imperial insight. But what have we learned? That Blackbeard and Governor Eden pioneered a political arrangement where criminality transformed into opportunity through the alchemy of official sanction. That their system created prosperity for a few while maintaining plausible deniability for those in power. That when finally challenged, the architects of corruption often escape consequences, even as their foot soldiers paid the ultimate price. Look around today. Maybe when legislators trade stocks with suspicious timing and perfect foresight. When regulatory agencies become revolving doors for the industries they oversee. When campaign contributors receive contract preferences worth hundreds of times their initial investment. Are we witnessing anything fundamentally different than the arrangement between Blackbeard and Charles Eden? The vessels have changed from wooden ships to corporate jets. The treasure chests have transformed into offshore accounts. The pirates now wear tailored suits instead of weather-worn coats. But the fundamental exchange, protection, and legitimacy in return for shared profits, it remains disturbingly intact. The most valuable lesson from Pirate Republic of North Carolina isn't that corruption existed in our past. It's that we're still sailing the waters charted by Blackbeard and Governor Eden 3 centuries ago. The question isn't whether we have pirates and politicians forming mutually beneficial alliances today. The question is whether we have courage to finally see the arrangement for what it is, and the will to chart a different course. If these historical echoes disturbed you as much as they did me, hit subscribe for more connections between America's shadowy past and our troubling present. Share your thoughts below on maybe which modern political arrangements would have made Blackbeard himself raise an eyebrow of appreciation. Until next time, remember, sometimes history's dark chapters aren't just stories of what was, but actually mirrors revealing what still is.